What do you think of when you think of the word mercy? Mercy. When I think of the word mercy, I think of a game that we used to play in middle school. In this game, two players would grab each other by the hands, interlock fingers, and then try to twist and turn each other's fingers, hands, and arms until one of them would cry out in pain, "Mercy!" And then the stronger player would let go out of compassion for the pain that they caused because one cried mercy. Well, there was one guy who was a head taller than everyone else, who was the best mercy player. He was a little bit of a bully also. And one day I found myself in the hallway with him, fingers interlocked, hands and arms twisting back and forth to see who would cry out mercy first. Now the game was going on for a bit. We're in a lot of pain, and I'm thinking, you know what, if he's not going to give mercy, I'm not going to give mercy either. And we struggled on and on until the school bell rang for the next class. We looked at each other and then let go at the same time and said, "We will do this again later." Now, I don't know what he was thinking afterwards, but I was walking to class thinking, oh my goodness, I was saved by the bell, right? God had mercy on me and my reputation that day. Now, I don't mention this so that any of our current middle schoolers get any ideas about playing this game, but when you think of mercy, what do you think of? Have you experienced mercy in your life? Maybe you played that same game that I did or a version of it, or maybe you're not so violent of a person, and the word mercy does not bring to your mind two boys trying to cause each other pain, but it brings to your mind compassion and sympathy and relief that you either gave or experienced when you were suffering. Well, whatever experience of mercy you have had, maybe when you experienced that mercy, you might have noticed that you tended to be a little bit more merciful to other people. The passage of Scripture we read today speaks about mercy. We're continuing our journey through the Gospel of Luke passage by passage. And we see today that Jesus said in verse 36, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." Again, in Luke chapter 6, Jesus is speaking to those who came to hear him and to those who wanted to be healed by him. So he's speaking to those who are already his followers and to those who might become his followers that day. And Jesus tells this crowd of already and potential followers, he tells them to live a life of extraordinary mercy, a life of giving mercy like God gives mercy. And today, maybe you're a follower of Jesus and you have been for a while, or maybe you're checking Jesus out. I still believe Jesus calls all of us to this life of extraordinary mercy. So what I want to do today is invite all of you to explore with me what giving mercy looks like according to Jesus and how we get better at it. Because I think we need to get better at it. I need to get better at it, as you'll see. First, a life of extraordinary mercy is a life of not condemning but valuing other people. A life of not condemning but valuing other people. Jesus says this in verse 37, "Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned." Now, what did Jesus mean when he said do not judge? Because in popular culture, when we say do not judge, what we often mean is don't you stop me from what I'm about to do. Right? Don't think less of me because of what I'm about to do. For example, I'm going to have another ice cream cone. Don't you judge me. We think do not judge means let me and let everybody else do whatever they want. But when we tell somebody do not judge, have you noticed? We ourselves are kind of judging them. We're comparing what we think to what we think they think. Again, for example, we're thinking, I know you think I should not have another ice cream cone. That's why I'm saying don't judge. And then when they do open their mouths and tell us what they think, I don't think you should have that other ice cream cone. It's easy for us to start thinking less of them, to start thinking, well, you're so critical, you're so judgmental. Why would you judge me having another ice cream? And so if we live by this popular definition of do not judge, do you notice what we actually end up doing? Is what we're telling somebody else not to do. Ironic, isn't it? And especially ironic when we consider that we actually do want judgment when judgment goes our way. It's when judgment might go against us that we start to think, don't you judge me. Growing up, I had this horrible habit of pushing my brother's head. He was a head shorter than me, so it was right there. And whenever I wanted to, he's not a head shorter than me now, just back then. Whenever I wanted to make a point of being the older brother, which was often, I pushed his head. My younger brother, for his part, did not respect me at all as the older brother, probably because I pushed his head. But there would be this wicked cycle in our relationship. He would disrespect me, and I would push his head, and then he would disrespect me back, and I would push his head. And one day, my parents had enough of this and sat us down. They told my brother, "Respect your older brother." And I was like, yes, judgment has come. Finally, somebody recognizes how disrespectful he is. And then they looked at me and told me, "Stop pushing your brother's head." And I thought, don't you judge me? We want approval for things we want to do, and then acceptance even when we're doing what others don't want us to do. Don't you judge me, we say. But if what Jesus meant by do not judge was anything goes in life, everyone can do whatever they want, then you know what happens at some point is we start to lose perspective of what is good, what is true, what is right, and what is wise. It is not wise to have a second ice cream cone after every meal. But don't you judge me. So Jesus could not have meant anything goes in life. He did not tell the crowd, be merciful. But if you're not merciful, that's okay too. I don't judge. That's not what he said. Jesus clearly indicated that his followers be merciful. So what does he mean when he says do not judge? I think the key is to see it together with what he says next, do not condemn. And one pastor gave this illustration of apples and of oranges to help us kind of work through this. He said, when we judge apples to be apples and oranges to be oranges, we're making a discernment. We're judging, we're discerning. We're telling the difference between one and the other. But then when we judge apples as not valuable because they're not oranges, and then we throw them out, we're heading towards condemnation. So we do need to discern what is good, what is true, what is right, and what is wise. And we ourselves need to do what is good, true, right, and wise. But when Jesus says, do not judge, do not condemn, I wonder if he meant we do not discard people or condemn people or devalue people when their thoughts and choices are different from ours. We still value them as people. So living a life of extraordinary mercy is a life that does not condemn, but values other people. Second, a life of extraordinary mercy is a life of forgiving. Jesus goes on in verse 37, forgive and you will be forgiven. Now, even though you might not agree with the thoughts and choices of others around you, one thing we might think is, well, they can do whatever they want as long as it does not affect me, right? As long as what they do does not affect me, and as long as what I do does not affect them, we're still okay. We don't judge, we don't condemn, we can still value each other. But friends, what if what they do does affect you? What if it hurts you? What if it hurts those whom you love? What do we do then? Even then, Jesus calls us to value others by forgiving. Now, that doesn't mean we say, well, it was nothing, whatever they did, because it might have really hurt. It does not mean we pretend it did not happen. It does not mean that the one who did the hurting doesn't face consequences. Nor does it mean we leave ourselves in a position for it to happen again. But I think what it does mean is we let go of our feelings to get them back. Or for someone to get them back for what they did. In other words, we let go of our feelings to devalue them like they devalued us. Forgive. I had a pastor colleague, in a class that I was taking a few years ago. And he had one of these deep baritone voices, that without a microphone just resonate in the room. Do you know what I'm talking about? I was going through a difficult time back then, and every time we met for class, he would ask me, Sam, how are you doing? Actually, it was more like, Sam, how are you doing? That voice made me feel like I was melting into comfort. I could have told him, as long as you're talking to me, I'm fine. He was leading a Bible study at his church one day when a man came in, spent the whole time in the study, and then pulled a gun and opened fire, killing 9 people, including the pastor, my friend. Families of the victims came to the hearing for the shooter, and in a surprise to many, some of them said to the shooter that they were choosing to forgive. Not everybody could do that. I remember one saying, I don't think I can go to the place where everybody else seems to be going, choosing to forgive. Which reminds us how hard it is to forgive sometimes. And I don't know what I would have done in their situation, but in the face of that incredible pain, many of them, that church family, chose to forgive. Now, things like this do not happen in most of our lives. Most of the offenses that we deal with are less than this. But whatever the offense, when Jesus says forgive, he takes us beyond this life of, as long as what you do doesn't affect me, we're fine. I don't condemn you, as long as you didn't hurt me. No, Jesus is calling us to a life that says, even if what you did hurt me, I still choose not to condemn you. I forgive you. So living a life of extraordinary mercy is a life that forgives others. The third, living a life of extraordinary mercy, is a life that is extraordinarily generous in doing these first two, valuing and forgiving others. Extremely generous, constantly doing so. Jesus said in verse 38, give and it will be given to you, a good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. When I started baking last year, this verse started to light up to me. For those of you who bake, you know what I'm talking about. Did you know when you put flour in a measuring cup, you can spoon some in and then shake the cup and press it down and you can fit more? Right? You can pack it down and fit more flour in. Now, I don't recommend this for baking unless the recipe says pack it in. But imagine you went to a farmer's market. You go to the stand at the market, it says all-purpose organic flour, 75 cents a pound. And you're like, that is amazing price. I got to get some. So you ask the person behind the counter, give me 5 pounds of flour, and they give you a container that's supposed to hold 5 pounds to hold in your lap, and they pour flour from a big bag into that container, and it gets filled to the top, and you're like, okay, that's good, but wait a minute, they're not done. They shake the container, and they press down on the flour, and they pour in some more. And you think, oh, I guess it wasn't all 5 pounds, but then they do it again. They shake it, press it, and pour in some more. And then when they're done and it's packed to the top, you think, okay, I guess maybe that's 5 pounds, but they're not done. They keep pouring on top until it spills all over your lap. And you go home and it's like 6 3/4 pounds. Oh my goodness. You'd be like, they could have gotten away with the first pour. But then they packed it in and packed in some more, and then they let it overflow on top. That's extraordinarily generous. Guess where you are going to buy flour from now on? It was organic too, right? Guess how you will feel about leaving tip in the tipping jar at that stand. Guess who you're going to recommend when other people are looking for flour. Generosity inspires generosity. Mercy can inspire mercy. And Jesus uses this market imagery of a good measure being poured out to help us see that's how merciful Jesus wants us to be. He wants us to be the person pouring out the flour. He wants his followers to lead situations in mercy, to be the first actor in giving mercy. He does not want us to live a life of getting maximum value at minimum costs. He does not want us to live a life of equivalent exchange, like you give me $1, I give you exactly £1. No, he wants us to live a life of extraordinary mercy, valuing others and forgiving others and being generous in those things. But how do we do that? How do we get better at that? Because when other people's thoughts and choices are different from yours, especially if they hurt you, it is so easy to not give mercy. It is so easy to assume the worst of people. It is so easy to talk only of people's failures and faults, to make assumptions about their life and character. It is so easy to wish in your head or to actually tell them, go to the land down under. And I'm not talking about Australia. Jesus calls us to live above ways like that and to give extraordinary mercy. So how do we do that? How do we get better at it? Well, the first way to get better at this in giving extraordinary mercy is to remember that the way you measure people is the way you will be measured. Jesus says exactly that in verse 38. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Everything he said before, do not judge, do not condemn, forgive, give, this whole picture of good measure being poured out and overflowing, it's all actually leading to this principle, that the way you measure others is the way you are going to get measured. We have a tendency to be stringent with other people and generous with ourselves. Don't you see that in your life? I see it all the time. I see it when I'm driving. Other people cut me off, and I will think, where did they learn to drive? I will see their license plate, and clearly it's not New Jersey, and I'll think to myself, oh, well, that makes sense. Well, full transparency, I grew up as a New Yorker, so I used to think that about New Jersey drivers. But I've changed, I've converted. Sometimes. But when I cut people off, you know what I'm thinking? Excuse me, I'm late, I'm so sorry, let me in, right? Move, I gotta get in, I gotta go. And other people are thinking of me, where'd that guy learn to drive? New York, right? So, we do this. And when Jesus says that the way we measure others is how we will get measured, he is removing the double standard that we often use. What if someone were to measure you by the standard you're using to measure them? Are you as consistent as you want others to be? And what if God were to measure you by the standard you're using to measure someone else? Are you as faithful as you're expecting others to be? When we remember that we get measured the same way we measure others, that tends to loosen us up towards being more merciful. And one way you can do that is to read and reflect on God's word often in your life. Because if I find myself constantly critiquing others and pointing out how wrong they are, and I do that more than asking God to help me with my choices and actions, then I know I'm using a double standard. And I know I need time with God. The second way you get better at giving extraordinary mercy is to remember that we are limited in what we can see of other people. Jesus gives this illustration in verse 41. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your eye? You've probably tried to get dust out of someone's eye. They come up to you and say, "Is there anything in my eye? Can you please take a look?" Imagine doing that with one of these. You're not going to be able to see much. And Jesus uses that illustration to draw our attention to the fact that, hey, we might not be able to see much of the other person. Think about the complexities of our English language. You know, if you didn't grow up here, it's really hard to learn English because a lot of English is not consistent. Why is the plural of mouse, mice? And the plural of spouse, spouses? Who thought of that one? Shouldn't it be spice because they spice up our lives? You might have heard this one before. Why do we drive on parkways and park on driveways? Who thought of that one? And last week, I heard this one. Why do we call bacon bacon and cookies cookies when we cook bacon and bake cookies? Go home with that. Listen, if we cannot master the complexities of the language we speak every day, how can we master the complexities of someone else's life enough to condemn them? It is so easy for us, even in the closest relationships we have with others, all the more so online, to attack people's choices, to attack people's character, to devalue people. You might have seen this online. I say we do it in our closest relationships. You ever tell somebody you know well, "You're so rude. You're so lazy. You need to stop being rude. You need to stop being lazy." These are words that attack people. And as we assume we know others and what's going on in their lives, what happens is it closes down communication, it closes relationships, and it can easily lead us down the road of condemnation. They're so lazy. You've just devalued them. You know, a picture of an iceberg can remind us so much of how there is so much more under the surface that we cannot ever see. And one way you might become better able to see people is to ask open-ended questions rather than jumping to conclusions. Maybe you ask some version of, "Hey, can you help me understand what's going on?" The third way you get better at living extraordinary mercy is to remember your limitations and what you can see of your own self. Not only are we limited in seeing others, we're limited in seeing ourselves. Jesus goes on in verse 42, "How can you say to your brother, 'Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye,' when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." You know, if we're honest, many times we're just not aware of our own selves. There are times when we're so busy looking for faults in other people that we miss seeing the faults in our own lives. And you know, as long as we miss seeing our own faults, it's easy to be self-righteous. It's easy to blame other people. It's easy to condemn other people. It's easy to justify your own behavior and criticize the behavior of others. And again, it's not easy. It's not hard, rather, from there to start condemning people and devaluing them. And then the same gets done to us. Human relationships, human societies fall apart for lack of mercy. One pastor put it this way: "You cannot love and judge at the same time. It is impossible to ascribe unsurpassable worth to others when you're using others to ascribe worth to yourself." When you convince yourself that you're better than others, you are using them to add value to you. But when you see your plank, it can humble you to realize that maybe maybe you haven't been seeing everything clearly. And instead of devaluing others, what could happen is you could realize that others are more valuable than you thought. And instead of judging, instead of condemning, you are on your way to mercy and love instead. I went to visit my parents recently. And as soon as I got there, my mom told me to go home. Now, they live over 2 hours away, and her response to my more than 4-hour investment to head up there was, go on home. Even though she had known I was coming, I didn't show up as a surprise. And as I was driving home, I found myself wishing she was a better mom. I found myself thinking it would be so nice if she would have baked up some corn muffins and we sat down and had a chat, even just a half hour. I had invested up to 5 hours getting up there. But the more I thought about it, I remembered how much pain she's in. How exhausting it must be for her to be taking care of my dad. And I started to think of myself. The last time I was in a lot of pain, I stayed in bed all day. And then when I saw myself more clearly, and when I saw her more clearly, instead of devaluing her as a mom and as a person, I started to value her more and love her more. One way you might better see yourself is, again, to spend more time with God each day, but also to have the humility to ask other people you trust. What do you think? Have I been unloving? Have I been too quick to judge and to condemn? And you might be able to see yourself better. Friends, Jesus calls us to a life of extraordinary mercy, a life of valuing others instead of condemning them, forgiving others instead of seeking to get back at them. That grows as we remember that the measure we use is the measure that is used to us. It grows as we remember that we are limited in seeing other people. It grows as we remember that we are limited in even seeing ourselves. But do you know when this life of extraordinary mercy really starts to grow? It starts to grow when we see the mercy of God in Jesus Christ for us. Because there is one person, and only one, who sees all the specks and all the planks in us. There is one and only one who sees it all and who has the right to judge, condemn, devalue, and discard. There is one, God. But God values, God forgives, and God redeems and has mercy. God gave His Son on a cross to take all the judgment, condemnation, devaluing, and discarding upon Himself. Jesus was crucified for our sins, for our brokenness. This one, God Himself, had incredible, extravagant, extraordinary love and mercy on you and me. And that's why Jesus says, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Friends, people don't get judged into knowing God's love in Jesus Christ. You did not get to know the love of God in Jesus Christ when other people judged you. No, you were loved into that relationship. You were given mercy into that relationship. It is this mercy that turns the tide in our relationships with God. It is this mercy that turns the tide in our relationships with each other. And it is this mercy on display in communion as we remember that Jesus' body was given for us and Jesus' blood was shed for us. Receiving God's mercy is what makes us better at giving mercy to other people. If you're not a follower of Jesus today, I invite you to put your faith in Him, to turn from life without Him to life with Him, to receive His mercy for you, and then be a vessel of mercy for others. And if you are a follower of Jesus and have been so for a while, I invite you to the same thing. Receive the mercy of God in Jesus Christ. He loves you. And then be a vessel of His mercy for others. Amen? That middle school bully and I, we never played mercy again. I think that's how we had mercy on each other. We did, at least to my memory, become more friendly with each other. We were saved by the bell. Brothers and sisters, if God has had mercy on us, all of us, how much more can we have mercy on other people? As we get into a time of celebrating communion, I invite you to close your eyes with me. Have you been judging, condemning, devaluing others around you? Have you assumed the worst of them? Have you forgotten to take a look at yourself? Or have you been judged, condemned, devalued by others? Do you carry hurt within you, pain within you? Wherever you are today, would you bring your need for mercy and compassion to God? Would you bring your need to be merciful to God? Bring your life to God as it is, sins and warts and brokenness and all. And let God fill you with His love, His grace, His mercy, His forgiveness instead. Let's take a moment to pray.